I stood outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The steam had dissipated, just like the warmth of the life I thought I had. The glass doors of the building reflected the busy hum of the city, but it was the scene inside that held my gaze. I could see him clearly: Luke Adams, my husband of 3 years, sitting across from a young woman. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a white dress, soft and inviting. She smiled at him in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, a smile that made him lean in, his eyes filled with something I had never seen before: tenderness. He reached out to gently tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. My stomach twisted, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Was this the end of us? 3 years of promises, 3 years of everything I thought was real. And now it was gone. Mommy, why aren't we going in? The soft, innocent voice of my 6-year-old daughter, Ava, snapped me back to reality. She tugged at the hem of my coat, her wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity. I knelt down, forcing a smile, though my chest was tight with a pain I couldn't explain. Sweetheart, Mommy just remembered she has some work to take care of. Let's go home, okay? Ava nodded obediently, but I could see the confusion flicker in her eyes. I was the one who had to shield her from the truth, the harsh reality of what was happening. The drive home was silent, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. The question kept circling in my head: when did I become an outsider in Luke Adams' life? 3 years ago, I had stood in that very same bureau, registering our marriage. Luke had picked me up in his arms, spinning me around, promising me that he would give me the best life in the world. The man I had married had once been so sure of us, so certain that we would always be together. But now, standing there, I wondered if he had been lying to me all along. Maybe even then, the cracks had already begun to form. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Luke. Samantha, I've got a work dinner tonight. Might be back late. You get some rest. I stared at the familiar message, but suddenly, it felt like I was looking at a stranger. He couldn't even be bothered to lie convincingly anymore. I texted back a simple okay, my fingers heavy as I tossed the phone onto the couch. Ava was already asleep in her room, and I sat alone in the living room, the memories of the past few years flashing through my mind. Luke and I had been college classmates. He was the charming student council president, popular, charismatic, and always the center of attention. I was just a quiet girl in the literature club, and when he noticed me, it felt like the greatest stroke of luck. After graduation, he joined his father's company while I worked as an editor at a magazine. We got married, and I quit my job to stay home with Ava, pouring everything I had into our little family. I had thought we were in love, that it was the kind of love that would last forever. But now, as I sat alone, I realized how naive I had been. Maybe I had been fooling myself all along. It was nearly midnight when Luke finally came home. The smell of alcohol and perfume hit me as he entered, the scent not at all like the one I wore. "Why are you still up?" he asked, shrugging off his suit jacket. His voice had that edge to it, annoyance, like he was irritated by my presence. "I was waiting for you," I said, standing up from the couch. I needed to say it, to get it all out. "Luke, we need to talk." He frowned, clearly exhausted. "Talk about what? I'm tired. Can it wait until tomorrow?" I could feel the anger rising, but I forced it down. "It's about our marriage." He paused, then waved his hand dismissively. "Samantha, aren't you overthinking things? We're fine. There's nothing wrong." "Nothing?" I looked at him, but for the first time, he didn't feel like my husband anymore. He felt like a stranger, someone I no longer knew. "Nothing," I said quietly. "Go get some rest." That night, we lay back to back in bed, a chasm of distance between us that no blanket could ever bridge. I felt it then, the cold, bitter truth that we were no longer a family. The man I had loved, the man who had once promised me the world, was now a distant memory. The next morning, Luke got up as if nothing had changed, putting on his suit, adjusting his tie with mechanical precision. "Important meeting today. I might be home late again," he said, kissing me on the forehead as if it were just another routine. I nodded, unable to say anything. After he left, I dropped Ava off at kindergarten and drove straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I needed to know if what I had seen the day before was real. I had to confront the truth head on. The staff greeted me warmly, as always. "Hello. How can I help you today?" I'd like to check if my husband, Luke Adams, came here yesterday and what procedures he inquired about, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The woman behind the desk hesitated. I'm sorry, but we have confidentiality rules. I handed her my ID. I'm his wife. 10 minutes later, I had my answer. Luke had indeed been there yesterday at 3 p.m. to inquire about divorce procedures. The woman with him was Claire Donovan, 23 years old, 5 years younger than me. I sat on the steps outside the bureau, holding the inquiry form in my hand. I laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that echoed in the emptiness around me. So this is what he's been planning all along, I thought. He had been preparing for a divorce while I had been fooling myself into thinking we just hit a rough patch. My phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was my mom, Samantha. How have you been lately? Is Luke treating you well? Her voice was warm, but I could hear the underlying concern. I forced a smile, trying to keep the tears at bay. We're good, Mom. Everything's fine. She sighed with relief. That's good to hear. You two have always been such a loving couple. Your dad and I are glad. Oh, next month is your 3rd wedding anniversary. Want to come home for dinner? Wedding anniversary? I thought about our wedding 3 years ago. Luke standing at the altar, promising to love me for the rest of his life. Back then, I really believed him. I've got to go, Mom. Something came up at work, I said, cutting the conversation short. After hanging up, I texted Ava's kindergarten teacher, telling her I might be late picking Ava up. Then I drove straight to Luke's company. I needed to hear the truth from him. I needed to confront him face to face. I wasn't going to let him keep living this lie any longer. The Adams Group building loomed before me like a fortress of glass and steel, cold and indifferent to the lives it affected within its walls. It was a place I had once visited often, back when I still believed in the life Luke and I were building. Now, stepping into the lobby, I felt like an intruder, an outsider. The front desk staff recognized me immediately. Mrs. Adams, here to see Mr. Adams? The receptionist asked with a polite smile. Yes, I replied, my voice betraying nothing of the storm raging inside me. He's in a meeting. I'll wait in his office. The receptionist's eyebrows furrowed, but she didn't argue. She called for the elevator, and soon I was on my way up to the top floor, the familiar chime of the elevator bells marking each passing floor. I walked the familiar path to Luke's office, the hallway lined with photographs of successful business ventures, the framed smiles of executives I had never met. It all felt so hollow now, so meaningless. When I reached his office door, I turned the handle without thinking. It wasn't locked, and what I saw inside stopped me dead in my tracks. Luke and Claire Donovan, locked in an embrace, lips pressed together as they kissed passionately. She was sitting on his desk, her legs wrapped around his waist. The sight of them together, of my husband with another woman, in the very place where I once sat beside him, making plans for our future, hit me like a physical blow. Time seemed to freeze. I was just a few feet away, yet it felt as though we were separated by a vast, unbridgeable chasm. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, but I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. Luke spotted me first. His face drained of color, his eyes widening in shock. Samantha, he said, his voice low, almost panicked. What are you doing here? Claire froze, her eyes wide, guilt and surprise flooding her features. She scrambled to pull herself off the desk, fixing her dress in a frantic attempt to cover up what had already been exposed. I stood there for a moment, my emotions swirling: anger, betrayal, disbelief, but the calm within me surprised even myself. I hadn't come here for this confrontation. I had come for answers. But somehow I knew there was no point in saying anything. I'm just here to pick something up, I said coldly, walking past them both to the filing cabinet where we kept copies of important documents. I opened the drawer, pulling out the folder that held our marriage certificate. Luke looked like he wanted to speak, to explain, but I didn't give him the chance. Luke, let's talk tonight, I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. I took the document and turned on my heel, walking out of his office without another word. As I entered the elevator, I could hear Claire's voice behind me. Luke, does your wife know? I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I walked straight into the elevator, the doors closing between us, and I breathed in deeply as though I had just stepped out of a storm. Alone in the mirrored space of the elevator, I stared at my own reflection. My eyes were red, but I hadn't cried. Maybe I had already shed all the tears I had left in me. Maybe I had already grieved the loss of my marriage, the death of everything I thought was real. But now, something else was stirring inside me, a cold, righteous fury. Justice. Revenge. I wasn't going to let Luke's betrayal go unanswered. I was done being the woman he could walk all over. I was done being the one who waited for him to change. I had one goal now: to make sure Luke knew the consequences of what he had done. The drive home felt like the longest one of my life. I wasn't sure what I would say to Luke when I saw him. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. But the clarity that came with the anger burning inside me was unmistakable. I had been blind for far too long, and now that I had seen the truth, I wasn't going to turn a blind eye to it again. When I got home, Ava was already in bed, her small form curled up under the covers. I kissed her forehead softly, not wanting to wake her. I sat down on the couch, my mind racing, replaying the scene at Luke's office over and over again. How long had this been going on? How long had he been lying to me? My phone buzzed again, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I saw Luke's name on the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I tossed the phone aside, my mind still clouded with everything I had seen. It wasn't until much later, when Luke finally came home, that the weight of what was happening truly hit me. He walked in, a bottle of wine in hand, and stopped short when he saw me sitting there. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously to the phone I had thrown on the couch. "Samantha, we need to talk," he said quietly, his voice suddenly sounding small, defeated. I studied him, but I wasn't angry, not in the way I thought I would be. My anger had already shifted into something else, something colder, more calculated. "No," I said, my voice calm and steady. "We don't need to talk." He looked at me, his confusion growing. "What do you mean? We can't just let this go." I stood up, walking slowly toward him. "You think this is about us talking?" I asked, the words dripping with disdain. "No, Luke. This is about what happens next. This is about me finally seeing you for what you really are." His face flushed with guilt, and he took a step forward. "Samantha, I know I've made mistakes," I cut him off. "Mistakes? No, this isn't just a mistake. This is a betrayal, Luke. You're not sorry for what you've done. You're sorry you got caught. And that's why I'm done." I didn't give him a chance to respond. I turned on my heel, walking out of the room. I had made my decision. The next morning, I went straight to a law firm. Josh Martin was recommended by a college roommate. He specialized in divorce cases and was known for his straightforwardness. When I walked in, he greeted me with a warm handshake, but I didn't miss the look of sympathy in his eyes. "Miss Samantha Gray," he said as I sat across from him, his voice serious. "I've reviewed your situation. Since your husband is having an affair and you have sufficient evidence, the court will likely favor you in asset division." I didn't want his money. I didn't want anything from Luke. The only thing I wanted was control over my own life and control over the future of my daughter. "I don't want his money," I said firmly. "I just want full custody of my daughter." Josh hesitated for a moment before responding. "That may require negotiation. The court typically leans toward joint custody, especially since the child is still young. I have proof he's unfit to care for her." I interrupted, my voice cold. "He's never home. And when he is, he's emotionally distant. He's neglected her for years." Josh looked at me closely, his eyes narrowing. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" I met his gaze without hesitation. I've never been more certain in my life. I could feel the weight of the decision I had just made settling on my shoulders as I walked out of the law firm. I wasn't just fighting for my rights anymore. I was fighting for Ava's future, for her peace of mind, and for my own dignity. This wasn't just about revenge on Luke, this was about reclaiming my life. As I drove to pick up Ava from kindergarten, I could already feel the pang of guilt creeping in. Was I doing the right thing? Was this the right way to protect her, to show her that love and respect come before anything else? Ava deserves so much better than the mess her father had created. When I arrived at the school, Ava came running toward me with her backpack bouncing on her back. "Mommy, look, I made a drawing today." She beamed, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. I smiled, taking the drawing from her hands. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." She grinned, clearly proud of her work, and it broke my heart that I couldn't shield her from what was coming. "Mommy, why were you so late today? Was work really that busy?" she asked, looking up at me with wide, innocent eyes. I hesitated. I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. "I had a few things to take care of, honey," I replied softly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "But we're together now, and that's all that matters." Ava nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I knew that, deep down, she felt the cracks in our family, even if she didn't fully understand them. I drove us home, my mind still in turmoil. How could I explain to Ava that her father was never coming back? How could I make her understand the complexities of love and betrayal without tainting her perception of the world? As I stepped into the house, I paused in the doorway. Every inch of this place had memories attached to it: the sofa where we sat watching movies together, the framed wedding photo on the coffee table, Ava's drawings on the wall. It was all a reminder of a life I thought I'd have forever. But now, it all felt like a dream slipping away, leaving only the cold truth behind. I set Ava down for her afternoon nap and sat alone in the living room, staring at the marriage certificate in my hands, the very same one I had picked up from Luke's office yesterday. This is it, I thought, as I read the words again. This was the final chapter of our story. And yet, part of me still wanted to scream, to lash out, to make Luke pay for everything he had done. I wasn't just angry at him. I was angry at myself, angry that I had been blind for so long. The phone buzzed again, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. It was Luke. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to pick it up. He had done enough damage, hadn't he? But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was done with him. I answered the call, my voice steady. "Luke." "Samantha," he said, his voice hesitant, like he didn't quite know how to approach me. I didn't let him finish. "No, Luke. You don't get to talk to me like everything is fine. You don't get to pretend that none of this matters. I saw you today." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear the guilt in his silence. "Samantha, please, don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't apologize. Don't explain yourself. You've already shown me who you are, and I'm done. We're done." I could hear him take a shaky breath, like he was about to say something more, but I didn't want to hear it. "I'll be at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow," I said, my voice firm. "Come if you want, but don't expect me to change my mind." I hung up before he could respond. The next day, I took Ava to kindergarten and then drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I had made up my mind. This wasn't about ending our marriage in some dramatic, emotional confrontation. This was about justice. When I arrived, Luke was already waiting outside, standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically somber. Claire Donovan was nowhere in sight. I walked past him without saying a word, heading straight for the desk. "I'm here to finalize the divorce," I said to the clerk, my voice calm but unwavering. Luke followed me inside, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel his eyes on me, trying to read me, trying to understand what I was thinking. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Samantha, can we just talk about this? We can figure something out." I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "You had your chance, Luke. You made your choice, and now, I'm making mine." He looked hurt, genuinely hurt, and that, for some reason, made everything feel worse. "Samantha, I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to happen like this." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I thought about everything he had done, about Claire, about the lies, and I realized that the man in front of me was not the man I had married. "Luke," I said, my voice steady and final, "you made a choice when you decided to betray me. I'm choosing to protect myself. And Ava." He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. "I don't need your money, Luke. I don't need your explanations. All I want is Ava, full custody, and the house." Luke's face paled. "What about child support?" I shook my head, cutting him off once again. "I'll manage. I've been managing all this time." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long while. He wasn't the man I thought I knew, and I wasn't the woman who could go back to the life we had. The divorce proceedings went surprisingly smoothly, with no disputes over property or custody. The papers were signed quickly, and once the clerk handed me the official documents, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. "Luke," I said, before walking out the door, "this is it. We're done." As I walked away, I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Back home, the emptiness of the house hit me hard. I stood in the living room, the same place where we had shared so many memories. But now, all I saw was the past. The house that had once been a home felt like a cage, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Ava came running into the room, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" she asked, her innocent voice laced with concern. I knelt down to her level, my heart aching as I saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "Sweetheart, we're going to be better than okay," I said, pulling her into my arms. "We're going to be just fine." The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, routine, and an almost surreal sense of calm. It was like I had stepped into a new world, one where I could breathe again. The weight of the divorce had been lifted, but so had the emotional anchors that had kept me tied to a man who no longer cared about me. But it wasn't just relief. There was something else, something I hadn't expected. It was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of being alone, fear of Ava growing up without her father around. I had promised myself I wouldn't let the divorce hurt her, but that didn't mean the fear wasn't there. Luke had come by a few times to see Ava, though the visits were always brief and awkward. His attempts at rekindling any semblance of normalcy between us fell flat. Each time, I was reminded of how little I actually knew the man I had once loved. And then, one afternoon, I ran into Claire Donovan again. I had been grabbing a quick coffee from the cafe beneath my office building, the one I used to frequent with Luke, when I saw her. Claire was seated at one of the tables near the window, her Chanel bag resting beside her, looking perfectly put together as always. She looked up as I walked in, and for a moment, our eyes locked. Samantha Gray, the woman who had been tossed aside, the one whose marriage had been so easily discarded, now a stranger in her own life. She knew what I was thinking, and she was right. "Claire," I said, keeping my tone even, though my blood was already starting to boil. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was smug, like she knew something I didn't. "Samantha, didn't expect to run into you here. You know, Luke told me a lot about you. He never really seemed happy with you." The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. "I don't care what he told you, Claire. Whatever he said doesn't matter anymore." Claire raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the power she held over me. "You know, I'm not the villain here. I didn't force him to leave you. He made that choice himself." I stepped closer, not backing down. "I never said you were the villain, Claire, but you're a fool if you think Luke actually loved you. If he could betray me, he'll do the same to you." Her expression faltered for just a moment before she put her guard back up. "You're wrong. He's different with me. He doesn't want to go back to you. He regrets marrying you, not me." I let out a dry laugh. "Claire, you're naive if you think a man like Luke can change for anyone. He's never been about loyalty or love. You'll see that soon enough." She didn't say anything more, just sat there with that cold, bitter look in her eyes. I turned to leave, but then, as if struck by an impulse, I looked over my shoulder. "You know," I said, my voice laced with a calm certainty, "Luke will leave you too. And when he does, don't come crying to me, because you'll be just as alone as I was." I didn't wait for her response. I left the cafe with my head held high, though a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had been a little too harsh. But then I remembered what she and Luke had done to me. I had every right to be harsh. The next few days passed in a haze of normality. Ava was doing well, better than I expected. She was adjusting to the new routine. I made sure she had everything she needed, and I filled her days with little joys. We went to the park, baked cookies together, and spent afternoons drawing. I was giving her the love she deserved, the kind of love Luke had neglected to show her. One afternoon, after dropping Ava off at kindergarten, I decided to take a walk through the park. I needed some time to clear my head. It was one of those warm, golden afternoons where the sun felt like a comforting embrace, and for a few moments, I allowed myself to relax. But as I walked past a bench, I froze. Luke was sitting there, looking lost, his suit jacket draped over the back of the bench, his tie loosened. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. I didn't know why I stopped. Maybe it was because there was still a part of me that hadn't completely let go, that still held on to the man I thought he was. He stood up when he saw me, a mix of regret and something else in his eyes. "Samantha," he said, his voice quiet, as though unsure of what to say next. "I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk." My chest tightened at the sight of him. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to reopen any wounds. But there was something in his face, something that reminded me of the man I had married, the one who had promised me forever. "I don't think we need to talk, Luke," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You made your choice. There's nothing left to say." He looked pained. "Samantha, I made a mistake. You don't get to apologize anymore. I cut him off, stepping back. You had your chance, and you blew it. This is it. I'm not going to keep going in circles with you. He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was already made up. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into feeling sorry for him. Luke, I said, taking a deep breath, we're done. You've already moved on, so should I. His face shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw the desperation in his eyes. But then, in that moment, I realized I didn't feel anything for him anymore, not the love I had once had, not even the anger I thought would last forever. Instead, I felt nothing, and that nothing was the most powerful feeling of all. I turned to walk away, but just before I left, I glanced back one last time. Goodbye, Luke. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need to. Back at home, I sat in the living room, the silence overwhelming. Ava was still at school, and I was alone with my thoughts. I had finally closed the door on the past, but I couldn't help but wonder, had Luke really changed? Did he regret losing me, or was it just guilt eating at him? And then, just as I was about to distract myself with work, my phone buzzed. A message from Luke. Samantha, I want you to know that I'll never stop loving you. No matter what, I'll always be here for you, and for Ava. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the message for a long moment. His words didn't affect me the way they once would have. I didn't feel a rush of relief or satisfaction. I simply felt empty. I deleted the message. As I put my phone down, Ava came running in through the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. Mommy, guess what? I made a new drawing today. I smiled, my heart swelling with love. This was what I had always wanted. This was my life now. And Luke, with all his regret and apologies, was no longer part of it. I had started to find my rhythm again. Life was quieter, simpler, and there was something profoundly peaceful about the stillness in the house. No more late nights waiting for Luke to come home. No more wondering if he was cheating or where he was. The chaos of my marriage had been replaced by something new, something that wasn't as terrifying as it used to be. Ava and I had settled into our new routine. Every morning, I dropped her off at kindergarten with a kiss on the forehead, and every evening, we'd sit together to have dinner and talk about our day. It was routine, yes, but it felt so much more stable than the life I had lived with Luke. Still, there were moments when I would feel the weight of the past creeping in. Moments when I would think about everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the hollow promises. But I had learned not to dwell in those moments. Instead, I focused on the future I was building for Ava and myself. But as much as I tried to move forward, there were days when the world would pull me back. And today was one of those days. It started with a call. I had just returned from picking up Ava from school when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made my stomach churn. I hesitated, but then I answered. Samantha Gray? A voice asked, sounding official. This is Detective Martin from the police department. I need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation involving your ex-husband, Luke Adams. I froze. Luke? My voice came out sharp, the sudden rush of panic evident. What's going on? Is he okay? The detective didn't hesitate. It's not about his health, ma'am. There's been an investigation into his business dealings, and we have reason to believe that there's more going on than what he has led people to believe. We need to speak with you regarding some of the details. Do you have time to meet? I felt my heart drop into my stomach. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was bigger. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll meet you. Where? 2 hours later, I found myself sitting across from Detective Martin in a small conference room at the police station. The room was sterile, the walls painted a dull shade of gray that seemed to absorb the little light that came in through the single window. It felt like a scene from one of those crime shows I used to watch. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. Thank you for meeting with me, the detective said, his voice low but reassuring. I'll get straight to the point. We've been investigating Luke Adams for several months now. There have been discrepancies in his business dealings, and we've uncovered evidence of money laundering, embezzlement, and other illegal activities tied to the Adams Group. We believe he has been using his position to cover up a lot of things. My heart hammered in my chest. I had no idea Luke had been involved in anything like this. He had always been so charming, so polished. How could I have missed it? You were married to him for 3 years, the detective continued, watching me closely. Did you ever suspect anything? Anything at all? I shook my head slowly. No, I didn't. He was always very good at hiding things, but I knew there was something off. I just didn't know what. The detective studied me for a moment, then slid a manila folder across the table. We have reason to believe that Luke may have been using you as a pawn in his schemes. We've traced several large transfers of money into joint accounts that you and Luke held together. We believe he may have used your name to funnel illegal funds without your knowledge. Do you recognize these transactions? I flipped open the folder, scanning the papers. There were account numbers, transfer amounts, and dates. Most of them looked familiar, but I hadn't noticed anything unusual at the time. The shock was setting in now. How deep had this all gone? I looked up at the detective, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. What does this mean? What are you asking me to do? We need you to cooperate, Samantha. If you were unknowingly involved in this, we can help clear your name. But we also need to get to the bottom of this. We have a warrant for Luke's arrest, but he's currently avoiding our attempts to locate him. I felt my stomach drop even further. Luke was a criminal, a man I had loved, a man I had shared a life with, was now a fugitive. It was too much to process all at once. And if I don't cooperate? I asked, my voice trembling, though I did my best to hide it. You could be implicated in the crimes he's committed, the detective replied bluntly. But if you help us, we can make sure your involvement remains minimal. You'll just have to give us any information you have on him and be willing to testify if it comes to that. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. This was too much. First the affair, then the divorce, and now this. I had thought I had seen the worst of Luke, but this was a new kind of betrayal, a betrayal of the highest order. The next few days were filled with paperwork, interviews, and phone calls. I had to go through everything with the police, recounting details of my marriage to Luke, any information I could provide about his business dealings, and any knowledge I had of his activities. It was exhausting. It was also incredibly painful. I had already mourned the end of my marriage, but this felt different. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Ava too. I couldn't help but feel the weight of her future pressing down on me. If Luke was really involved in something this illegal, what would that mean for her? Would she be tainted by his actions too? I couldn't let that happen. That night, after Ava had gone to bed, I sat down and took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror. I wasn't the woman I had been 3 years ago, the woman who believed in the fairy tale, who trusted her husband without question. I was stronger now. I had no choice but to be. I had to be brave for Ava, for myself, and for the justice that had to be done. The next morning, I received another call from the detective. Samantha, we need you to meet us at the Adams Group building, he said, his voice urgent. We've located Luke, and we believe he's still hiding inside. My heart raced. This was it. The moment of reckoning was finally here. Please be careful, the detective added. He's not going down without a fight. I hung up the phone, a surge of adrenaline flooding my body. For the first time since everything had begun, I felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about Luke anymore. This was about making sure the truth came out, about making sure Ava's future was protected. This time, there would be no running away, no more lies, no more hiding. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. I didn't know what to expect when I got there, but I knew I couldn't sit back and let things continue the way they were. I had made the decision to move on from Luke, to step into my own future. But that didn't mean I could ignore the impact his choices had on everyone around him. And I wasn't about to let him drag us down any further. Ava was with her grandmother for the day, and as much as it killed me to leave her, I knew this was something I had to do. I had to confront the truth head on, not just for myself, but for the future. I was working so hard to build. The drive to the Adams Group building felt endless. I tried to steady my breathing, to calm the storm that had been brewing inside me ever since the police had first contacted me. The closer I got to the building, the tighter the knot in my stomach became. Luke was in there, hiding, waiting for the storm to pass. But this time, there would be no escape. I parked in the lot across the street and walked toward the front entrance of the building, the heavy glass doors looming before me. I took a deep breath and pushed through the doors. The familiar cold marble floors greeted me. But today, everything felt different. Today, I wasn't the wife who had blindly trusted her husband. Today, I was the woman who had seen through the lies. As I walked through the lobby, I could feel the weight of the eyes on me. The receptionists glanced at each other, but no one said anything. They all knew who I was. They knew who Luke was. And today, the world was finally going to know the truth. I was led up to the top floor by a security guard, and as I stepped off the elevator, I saw the door to Luke's office. I hesitated for just a moment before I walked forward, the uncertainty in my chest fighting against the surge of determination that pushed me onward. When I reached the door, I paused. I knew Luke was inside, probably pacing, probably planning his next move, but I couldn't let him control this any longer. I knocked once, and when I heard no answer, I pushed the door open. Luke was sitting at his desk, his hands clasped together in front of him, his eyes vacant, as if he had already accepted his fate. Claire Donovan was standing by the window, her back to me, staring out into the city below. When she heard the door open, she turned, her eyes flicking between me and Luke. There was no sign of guilt on her face, only a knowing, cold look that told me she felt justified in everything that had happened. Luke's eyes widened when he saw me, and for a moment, I could see the panic that flashed across his face before he masked it with a facade of indifference. "Samantha," he said, his voice strained. "What are you doing here?" I stood in the doorway, my posture straight, my heart pounding, but I refused to let it show. "I think you know why I'm here, Luke," I said coldly, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. Claire moved to speak, but I silenced her with a single look. This wasn't about her. This was about Luke. I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper, but full of power. "I've done everything I can to keep my family together. I've bent over backward, trying to hold us together despite your lies. But you didn't just betray me, Luke. You betrayed Ava too." His face twisted, and I saw the shame seep in, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to care anymore. "I didn't ask for your forgiveness," I continued, "and I don't want it. What I want is justice. You have no idea what kind of damage you've caused, not just to me, but to our daughter. You've spent months, no, years betraying everything we built, everything I believed in. And now you want to play the victim?" Luke opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "You don't get to speak, Luke. Not anymore." I turned to Claire, who was standing there, her arms crossed over her chest, as if she were waiting for me to make the next move. "You," I said, my voice dripping with contempt, "are no better than he is. You knew what you were doing, but you didn't care. You just wanted what you wanted, and now you're left with a mess." Her lips twisted into a smirk. "You think you can tell me what to do? You think you're the one who holds the power here? Look at yourself. You're just a woman who's been left behind, trying to find a way to fix what's already broken." I didn't let her words faze me. "You're wrong. I'm not the one who's broken, but you will be. You'll find out what it's like when someone leaves you behind, when someone uses you for their own gain, because that's what Luke will do to you. And when he does, don't come crying to me, because I won't care." The silence in the room was deafening. Luke stood up from his desk, his hands trembling slightly as he approached me. "You don't understand, Samantha. It wasn't just about the affair. It was never just about that. I was struggling." "I know," I interrupted, my voice rising. "You weren't struggling. You were selfish. You wanted what you wanted, and you never cared about what anyone else needed. Not me, not Ava. And now, you're going to pay for that." I turned to leave, but I stopped at the door, glancing over my shoulder one last time. "I'm done with you, Luke. I hope you enjoy the life you've built, because I've finally figured out what I deserve. And it's not you." I walked out of the office without looking back. The sound of my heels clicking against the floor felt like a declaration of independence, a final step away from everything that had once been my life. When I stepped into the elevator, I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over me. I had taken control. I had confronted the truth, and I wasn't going to let Luke or anyone take that power from me again. Back at home, I sat in the living room, the silence of the house surrounding me like a protective shield. I could hear Ava's laughter from the other room as she played with her toys. It was comforting, hearing her so happy. I picked up my phone, glancing at the missed messages from Luke, the ones I hadn't bothered to answer. But this time, I didn't need to respond. I didn't need him anymore. A few minutes later, a new message came through from Luke. "Samantha, I'm sorry. I've made mistakes, and I don't know how to make it right, but I want to fix this. I need you to understand." I stared at the message, feeling the old ache in my chest. But this time, it didn't hurt. I deleted the message without replying. The days that followed felt almost like a dream. There was a strange kind of peace settling in, an odd calmness after the storm of betrayal and anger. I had confronted Luke, faced the truth, and now I was free. Free from his lies, free from the pain he had caused me, and free from the chains of a marriage that had never truly existed in the way I had believed. Ava had adjusted well to the changes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was starting to live for myself again. It was late one evening when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Luke. I hadn't heard from him since our last confrontation at the office. "Samantha, I know you hate me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I know I've hurt you, and I can't undo that, but I want to try to make it right. I want to be there for Ava. I don't want to lose you forever." I stared at the words, the familiar pang of old feelings rising inside me. I could feel the weight of his regret, but it didn't move me. I had already walked away from him once, and I had no intention of walking back into the same trap. The man I once loved, the man who had promised me the world, was still the same man who had lied to me, who had betrayed me, and who had broken everything I believed in. His words no longer held any power over me. I deleted the message, but even as I did, a quiet voice in the back of my mind asked me, what if? What if I gave him a chance? I shook my head. No, this time, I'm doing it for me, for Ava. The next morning, I went to work as usual, but there was a different energy in the air, a sense of finality. For months, I had been living with the remnants of my old life, but now I was ready to fully embrace the future, to let go of the past, and to live for the person I had become. That evening, as I sat down to dinner with Ava, I looked at her with a sense of pride. My daughter was my world. She had been through so much, and yet she still smiled, still laughed, still brought light into every dark corner of our home. As she told me about her day at school, her eyes sparkling with excitement, I realized that this was what mattered. The love between us, the bond we shared, it was enough. I didn't need Luke to validate that. I didn't need anyone to validate that. After dinner, as Ava went to bed, I sat in the living room, the familiar quiet of the house enveloping me. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. I had come to terms with everything: Luke's betrayal, the end of our marriage, the fear that had once paralyzed me. And now, I was starting to see myself in a new light. I was stronger than I had ever known. I wasn't defined by the mistakes of my past, but by the choices I was making now. I had made peace with my past. I had found closure, not in Luke's apology, not in the promises he had made, but in the realization that I no longer needed him to move forward. I had learned to stand on my own, to make my own choices, and to embrace my own strength. And then, just as I thought I had reached the end of this chapter, my phone buzzed again. I opened the message before I could stop myself. "Samantha, I know it's late, but I need you to understand that I'm not giving up. I can't undo the damage, but I am willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I am still here for you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. I'll wait. I'll wait for as long as it takes." I read the message, and for the first time, I didn't feel a rush of anger or pain. I didn't feel anything at all, because I had already made my decision. I deleted the message, and with it, all the remnants of Luke's hold over me. I wasn't going back. I had moved forward, and that was where I was staying. The life I was building was mine, and it was enough. Ava and I were going to be fine. We had everything we needed right here, and I would make sure that no matter what came our way, we would always be okay. With one last glance at my phone, I turned it off, and with that, I felt the final weight of the past fall away. I didn't need Luke anymore. I had finally found my freedom.